AB5 is the law that keeps on giving. There are a few interesting developments that we're going to go over. I'll also take a look into what this means for you in 2020 and beyond. Now, if you're working in the gig economy, you know that this bill is going to affect you. It's going to affect a lot of different industries, but we're going to focus on rideshare. Here's a quick overview of the main point of this bill. From the National Law Review, it says, as of January 1st, 2020, the default standard for independent contractor treatment will be the ABC test. Now, I'm sure if you've been following this closely, as you should, you probably already know what the ABC test is. If not, here's what it says. Under the ABC test, a worker is assumed to be an employee unless the business demonstrates A, that the worker is free from control and direction of the hiring entity in performing the work, both in the contract for performance and in fact. B, that the worker performs work that is outside of the usual course of the hiring entity's business. And C, that the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as the work performed for the hiring entity. Uber already drew its line in the sand and declared that it will not be calling its drivers employees. And they're already being sued for that statement. Now, there's been a big vocal push for a minimum wage standard of $15 an hour for drivers in California. But there are a few tech advances that make me want to urge caution before pushing back hard. I've brought this up in my previous video. But let's step back from all that. The majority of people want to know how this bill is going to affect them in 2020 and beyond. There are going to be difficulties with this law if these companies are compelled to declare their drivers as employees. Let me explain. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I will link all referenced articles in the description below so you can read them and become better informed. New Jersey is also going to create its own version of AB5. One of the bigger points that really stuck out to me in this article is the fact that it says here, more than a quarter of Americans now rely on the gig economy to supplement their income in some manner, and 1 in 10 rely on it as their primary source of income. Financial volatility and access to benefits are major challenges for these so-called independent contractors. And New Jersey is not the only state trying to figure out how to ensure that large swaths of workers receive minimum wage, paid sick leave, health care, and more. They reference it in the middle of this article, but there is that old saying, as goes California, so goes the nation. But it touches on one of the biggest problems that critics point to. In light of AB5, how will Uber pay all of its drivers the California minimum wage? Now, according to this article, it estimates that there are 200,000 drivers in California alone. 200,000 people that are going to be expecting a check. Let's do the math. So let's say you have 200,000 people and they've all worked 8 hours. That's 1.6 million hours that need to be accounted and paid for. Let's continue further. Let's say each month there's 20 working days. That's 5 days every week for 4 weeks. 1.6 million times 20. Now there are 32 million hours that need to be paid for in the course of the month. We're going to times that by the California mandate of $15 an hour, and we've got 480 million, and that's a monthly expense. 480 million. And if we multiply that number by 12, we get $5.76 billion to support all the drivers in California. If they were classified as employees, Uber would be losing $5.76 billion annually. And that's just California. That means two things. The first option is what they're doing currently. They're just going to outright refuse to classify their drivers as employees. And the second option is this. They're compelled by the higher courts to go ahead and classify drivers as employees. That means there's going to be a culling of so many people because they're going to keep only their highest ranked drivers. And people tend to forget, especially when it's a very emotional issue, that there are second and third order effects that come along with the decision-making process, especially when you institute a policy. There are consequences and consequences to those consequences. Now, in the political sphere, there's a lot of jokes regarding 4D chess. The reason that lots of things are the way that they are, if you consider them messed up, is because a lot of people didn't even consider the what-ifs of every decision, of every policy that they wanted to push along. But the squeaky wheel will always get the grease. The more people talk about an issue, the more airtight the end result will be. The negative what-ifs have to be discussed along with the positives in order for this to really work out well in everyone's favor. There are a lot of articles to sift through, there's a lot of news, there's a lot of old case law. A current positive is this: we still have time to come up with a decent solution that doesn't really harm anybody. But right now, it would really pay if everyone kept their eyeballs open, took a look at the news, watch what's happening in the world today. It's going to be a very different place in the next few years. Be good, do well, let's go make some money.